Well, hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. Aaron, Mary, and James here. The trio's back. We also have a wonderful guest, my colleague, my friend, Joseph Lewin. And today we really want to kind of break down another topic we've done before. And again, for the new listeners, I do want to give you the 30 seconds about what this show's about. We discuss and dialogue about these topics that we deal with every day. And hopefully within that dialogue, you can find something that's insightful to you, because that's why we like to do it with us. So this is one of those insightful topics, and you hear so much dialogue about it to an ad nauseum, and that is lead gen. And why I wanted to bring Joseph on, again, to talk about this discussion, is we were invited on a webinar about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and Joseph and I had such a different point of view about lead gen that I think we just need to discuss it more, right? Because there's still this other side that we really need to deconstruct and untangle. And it's not that it's bad or good. It's that we think we actually can use lead gen in the right way to have the right relationship. And that's really what I want all of us to kind of discuss today and maybe make the case for it and see where we go from that. So just right off the bat, I'm going to throw it over to you, Joseph. You can kind of explain again our viewpoint on relationship marketing and maybe how lead gen fits within that.
Yeah, so I think lead gen, the conversation around lead gen, at least on LinkedIn, where a lot of us are spending time and having these conversations, typically either go, hey, lead gen is awesome. You need to be collecting leads. You send those leads to your sales team. They then have those people's contact information so they can call them and pitch them your product. And the problem with that model is that you usually end up having content that's not really associated with your product at all. And then it's really a bait and switch. And that's why it's really gotten a bad rap, is because you're getting called by a random salesperson about something that you have no idea why they're calling you or how it connects to the ebook you downloaded or whatever. Or maybe it has like a very vague tie into it, usually very early stage, when you're just starting to think about a topic. You wouldn't buy that product for another 6 months or a year, but you have a salesperson who's calling you with a quota and they're trying to close you by the end of the month so they can meet their quota. And it just creates a really bad buying experience. And if if you're above a certain title on LinkedIn, you're going to get targeted with tons of spam outreach, either through email or LinkedIn. You've experienced that, and it's really annoying. On the flip side, you have a lot of conversation with B2B companies saying, well, totally the opposite is true. Buyers are going to buy whenever they are completely ready to buy. You can't influence that decision at all. You should just ungate it and let them come to you. And my perspective is really somewhere in between those two things. It's, should we really just leave the relationship completely up to when that person thinks they should have a conversation? And most of the customers that we work with, they have a unique way that they approach the market. So if you wait all the way until that person's ready to buy, they've already defined their requirements, and you don't have the opportunity to help them define what their requirements should be for whatever solution they're looking for. And at that point, it usually ends up becoming a price game. Whereas for our customers, we're trying to help them get into the position of being a trusted advisor as early as possible to help define those requirements. And so I think it's possible, and I'm sure we'll dig into it as we go along, to create content that automatically helps to qualify who those people are. So the content itself, when somebody accesses it or wants it, it shows that they're further along into the buying process than just your typical tire kicker would be. And then whatever follow-up you have to that is hyper targeted to that specific type of content. And you're not reaching out to them to pitch them, but you're reaching out to them to add value, to be in that trusted advisor position, and ultimately just to help them. And some of those will lead to a sale, and they kind of easily can transition to a sales conversation, but it's also just building relationships with people who will be in the market at some point, and you're in a much better position to work with them. And I guess the final thing I'll say on that is it's kind of going back to the roots of where lead gen originally came from, which is permission marketing. And modern lead gen has really taken all of the principles of permission marketing and gotten rid of them and just spams people at this point. So if you're sending something to somebody they actually want, and then you have a follow-up to that that's really meaningful, then you can build great relationships with people through lead gen-esque strategies.
Love it. And that's why I wanted you on to talk about the full gambit there and explain it. Last time when we spoke about this as a group, I was in Sassmore, and I was also a little more heated about this. And I think that's really my mindset has changed, and it's changed because of who we work with and why. And again, I think the big unlock for me is this is maybe a problem for SaaS, but it's not the same problem for small business and B2B businesses, right? Is just as you explained, Joseph, is we need to talk to them now to help them out. Lead gen can be a tactic within our strategy to make sure we speed to the relationship as quick as possible and then provide value through the content. It is not a conversation about should we gate or ungate? Is lead gen good or bad? These things we were really thinking about last time. With that being said, Mary, I'm going to throw it to you, our new VP of marketing here on the show. When you're going to start a GTM strategy, is lead gen even on your mind? Like, would you make an argument for it, and then you can make an argument against it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm coming into a company as head of marketing that does only their major go-to-market tactic is outbound. So downloading lists from ZoomInfo. I don't know if we would technically call it lead gen in the form of like, an ebook download, but you are using someone's contact info and contacting them before they ask to speak to you, and often not even knowing who you are, what you do, or why you exist. And I spent, this is my day 2. I spent most of today listening to those cold calls, what they sound like, and it's interesting. I have not been in a world where we did like cold call outbound. The script changes for depending on the industry. It changes depending on the job title, that kind of thing. It doesn't work. It's not efficient. So they found that out pretty quickly. So they're kind of at the tail end. This is kind of how most SaaS companies work. They find out outbound works. So you get like a certain amount of leads. They can reliably expect a certain amount of opportunities to come from that, and then a certain amount of customers, right? So the logic that they try and apply is then, okay, well, I need to hire more reps, fill that funnel, make that top funnel even bigger. And then of course, more opportunities and customers will come. And usually that just doesn't happen anymore. So as they try and scale the sales team, the funnel does not scale along with it. And so my company, the one I'm with now, has found that out. So the sales team has been cut to a more minimal sales team, and they're focusing more on those like enterprise, like big account deals. So this is a really exciting place for me to come in because like you said, Aaron, I used to be heavily on the no lead gen in any case whatsoever. But in the right play, it can work. So I don't think it can work for our high ACVs. Like you said, it's probably not going to work for Coca-Cola. But those like small to mid-sized businesses, the lead gen tactic can work as long as you have the foundational marketing pieces in place that we always talk about. So your ideal customer profile, your industry, your value proposition, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been a very interesting 48 hours of onslaught.
Yeah, but we'll definitely make you do more episodes about it. One thing I want to throw out there, because to bring James in, because I think one of the things we're thinking too is where last time we talked about, is this a strategy issue, a tactic issue? Again, I think where Joseph and I are going to tackle it is like it's a content issue. And again, lead gen is the way to get the content to the people. And specifically for our customers that we work at Proofpoint and Gorilla 76, you need kind of that data requirements type of content. You need that figure out an ROI content. And maybe that's the solution to better lead gen. You just have any thoughts about that, James? Basically making better content to make lead gen better?
I think like I understand exactly that idea, which is, I guess the follow-up would be like, well, the gate does not get people the content. The purpose of the gate is not to get people content, it's to get people's information. But I do understand the idea of bringing permission marketing back into play and saying like, okay, well, some of this content is, we know that someone could use this, because we know where they're at. Like, so some stuff, like a guide to specifying a oven, since you used an oven example, you know that you can reasonably assume that someone reading that is approaching the process, at least intellectually, of specifying an oven. So lead gen is useful because maybe now you have this group of folks and you know when they hit this spot, you can reasonably assume maybe what other content would actually be helpful. I guess my follow-up question would be about the handoff. Because so the situation that happens with Gorilla and presumably with Proofpoint, because y'all are an agency, is that at some point the conversation is one that the client's sales team, which is really for us usually a bunch of engineers, wants to be having with the customer directly, and is not it isn't something that can be delivered with content because it requires the exchange of quite a lot of proprietary information, or, details about someone's application. Content can't spend, 3,000 words being like, in this particular application, in this particular application, in this particular application, and so on. So kind of, I guess, what's y'all's philosophy on like how that handoff happens? What is the type of guidance that marketing content should be giving, and at what point then does a content lead, like you've termed someone like content ready, when does that person become engineering or sales ready in your eyes?
Yeah, this is a great segue, and you're the co-host of the show, and that's why I appreciate you. Joseph, this is a perfect question for you is, again, relationship enablement, conversation magnet is the pieces in place we're trying to build to address what James is saying. So I'll kind of let you run with that where you want to.
Yeah, and I would almost, not to disagree with you, Aaron, because I think what you're saying is right, but I would almost take it a step further. I would say the difference is really mindset first. So we are not trying to first make a sale. We're trying to build relationships that lead to sales. And the difference is that we're planting seeds to grow an orchard, not chopping down the apple tree to get a little bit of fruit now and destroying your potential for fruit later. And that to me is the best kind of visual illustration of what lead gen does. You have an apple tree, you cut down the tree, you go, look, we got a hack to getting fruit faster. Yeah, you did. And now there's no more tree. So instead, we're planting seeds, we're watering those seeds for them to grow. To me, in the long run, your marketing and sales need to probably be under one roof, but not sales driven, growth driven, where you have marketing and sales understanding the other side and working together as a team, versus like the traditional idea of marketing creates a lead, sends it over to sales. Sales says this lead sucks. Do a better job of qualifying these people before we waste our time. Instead, your sales team, instead of making 100 dials a day and maybe catching 2-3 people having those conversations, why not make those 2 or 3 conversations where they're seen as a trusted advisor and they're just giving consulting to people in the space that could become future customers? They're building those relationships. Will every single one of those lead to a sale? No. And if that's not the goal is to build relationships, help to position your company as having a unique point of view, that they define their requirements of what they're looking for around your advice. And when they actually go to buy, you've now defined exactly what they need, and your company's the best fit for that. Like if you can get in early, you're building that rapport. So seeing your sales team as doing what might be traditionally marketing type things, building brand, building your position, but they're doing that through one-on-one conversations with people that are initiated through a piece of content. So the piece that helps you get there, and I think the difference is, I really like for those pieces of content not to be guides or things like that. It should be something that's very actionable, that hopefully that person is going to use to do their job more effectively. So it might be some kind of a calculator or a worksheet, like something we're potentially going to be working at Proofpoint soon would be like question guides for doing customer interviews, or customer profile templates or things like that, things that somebody would actually take and could actually take and use. And then, basically you have, stumbling here a little bit, you would have some kind of content. So say a live event or a series of live events around a particular topic that's ungated, that you're inviting people to, you're getting in front of them. Then the action item is, hey, you can download this worksheet from us to take action on what we're talking about. So maybe we do a series on customer research. And then out of that, hey, we have this download that you can get. If somebody watches that video, they download that. Clearly, they're interested in the topic, right? So then if somebody from our team follows up with them on LinkedIn afterward or through email or whatever, and we say, hey, thanks for coming to the event and downloading the worksheet. I'd love to schedule 30 minutes with you and give you some pointers on the worksheet. You fill it out and I'll talk with you through it, give you some pointers. That's what we're talking about doing. That's how do you start that conversation as quickly as possible? And then, kind of to take that to a close, you can easily turn that into a sales conversation by, you help them, you give them advice, just absolutely adding value to them up front. And at the end of that call, you just say, hey, would you like any more help with this? And if they say yes, it is now a sales conversation. And it's the easiest way to start a sales conversation ever, because you just hook them up with a bunch of things that are valuable, whether you work with them or not. And then you just simply ask that question. And if they say yes, cool, let's schedule a time and here's some different ways we could work together. Or they say no and you go, awesome. Well, let me know if there's anything else I could do to help. We're going to have another event coming up next month on XYZ topic. Love to see you there. And now you've had this value add conversation that's built around something that, is a content piece.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to break down the content, because I think that's the differentiator of what we're talking about with the lead gen is, again, lead gen is just the lever to have this thing happen, which is we want to have a relationship conversation. Now, that doesn't work for every business. What we were talking about specifically with our customers is a lot of time what happens is someone's locked into a contract for 9 to 12 months. So then even if you did lead gen and then you started that sales conversation, they can't buy for 9 to 12 months. So that's probably the main reason why you don't want to do lead gen that way, to have a sales conversation. So we're trying to invent new things where we speed the relationship conversation, have relationships faster. Therefore, you can get to the sales conversation that works for the relationship much better. Now, Mary, from a strategy standpoint, this is kind of the first time we've broken it down to you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I kind of love this actually. It's almost, I have been kind of thinking, the big demand gen initiative is people will contact you when they're ready to buy, right? So only a certain percentage, usually less than 10% of your market is in market ready to buy at any given time. So you're essentially marketing to the other 90 to 99% of your audience at any given time. But this is interesting because it's almost like you might not even know you are in market or not in market. This is a solution that you might not even know exists. And so you're telling me, if you're finding this thing we created for you, like Joseph said, a template or an ROI calculator or whatever, that's signaling to me that you might need help. So now bringing you in as a trusted advisor to help them along and maybe see a solution that they didn't even know exists is really interesting. So yeah, I like that. I don't know if I would even call it lead gen though. So it depends on how we're defining our terms.
Yeah, I would kind of consider it similar lead gen tactics, but again, going more back to permission marketing. Somebody has clearly shown interest. You're calling them about that thing, or I wouldn't even, you could potentially call them, but even just reaching out to them on LinkedIn. That person saw your face on a live, they downloaded something from you, and then you as one of the people on the call reaches out afterward. That's basically a warm outreach at that point. Technically it's probably cold outreach, but barely at that point. And you're not, I think the difference is you're not trying to sell them anything on that call. You're just trying to help. And I think the other piece that's important about this is you have no idea how long that person's going to work at the company they're at. So they could change roles tomorrow. If you've built a relationship with them and, maybe they're working somewhere where that company goes, heck no, we're never doing anything like that. But this person wants to work with you and they think it's awesome. They change roles. they could bring it in at their new organization. And I know at my previous company, that would happen a lot. A lot of new sales was somebody going from one company over to a new company. And then they would say, hey, you guys have got to be using this product. It revolutionized what we were doing over here. So it's just building relationships with people. Those people could become potential partners. They could become referral partners. There's all kinds of things that come from just straight up helping people do their job more successfully and building that rapport up front, whether it leads to a sale or not. And I think it's a huge miss to waste your sales team's time on cold outreach 24/7 versus how can we position this person as being an industry leader, a trusted advisor? How can we make it so that people just want to talk with them and work with them? I think if you're doing that successfully, then it really does change the game from sales being all about closing a sale today and more about building relationships that continue to bring in business, continually.
Definitely. James, did you have a follow-up to something previous?
I think I do. Conceptually, I agree with like quite a lot of all of this. And I think that it's a great play. I can think of a couple of clients that I work on who have motions that might love this, that are ready for this. But I also think of clients who I work on who they don't, this wouldn't be replacing cold outreach. This would be replacing time that someone spends actually answering inbound requests. Like that the salesperson the salesperson is one person. They answer inbound requests and do pre-engineering. Like that's kind of like the classic guerrilla client. And I wonder if there's what are the steps that need to be taken then to make this manageable? Because the sardonic way of asking this question would be, but Joseph, relationships are hard. They're hard work. So I wonder what, it's more of a go-to-market question than a marketing question, but what then has to change if you're currently operating entirely on inbound and you want to make this a possibility because you are finding yourself talking to people too late.
Yeah, my answer.
That's a good point.
Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So my answer would be, you should, if you are running total inbound motion, you should have a pretty good idea of what your conversion rate is at different life cycle stages. So person submits a form, they want to talk to sales. At what rate do they become an opportunity and then a customer? If you're doing some kind of warm outbound, Joseph was saying is how we would categorize it, that's almost always going to be less, because someone raising their hand saying, I want to talk to sales is an incredibly high intent lead. So this is somebody who's ready to buy. They likely understand what your product is. They just need almost a consultation call. How can your product specifically work for me? So that's a really good question, James, because I think a lot of people do get excited about new go-to-market initiatives. And so they kind of deprioritize ones that are solid and working. When in reality, it's you really need to look at the intent of the customer and what conversion rates you kind of expect to get.
Definitely. Joseph, you want to answer it too?
Yeah, I would say one other thing to be thinking about is what is the quality of the long-term relationships that are coming through those inbound. If they're awesome, you shouldn't be doing anything different. If you're getting great inbound and it's filling your pipeline and that's working out great. But if those typically end up being hey, we have this project we're working on, here's our requirements, here's, we're working with 500 vendors on it, give us your best price. That's not going to be the same as if you come in and define the requirements. In other words, if they're coming into your competitors and going, hey, we need a price on something and it's tailor-made for your company, it's going to be really hard for other people to compete on that by the time it gets out there. And that's really ultimately what we're trying to do, is make it so that you're really the only option when these people go to buy, or, the one that makes the most sense. So I think looking at the quality of those relationships. So if a lot of your inbound, it always comes down to price, and that's not what you do best. You have some kind of unique way of or, you're based on relationships or your service or whatever other element is important, that's where I would say it might be worth diverting some of that attention. But I would mostly see this as something that you're doing cold outbound. It's not working. How can you get your sales team to engage and build relationships? And I say that it takes longer. In reality, it probably doesn't. As in, like, over the course of a month, will you close as many deals this way? Maybe not. Over the course of a quarter, I think you probably will. And over the course of a year, I feel very confident that you're going to be closing more deals with a combo of this, this marketing content that leads to warm conversations with people. And we've already seen that. I mean, with clients, we ran a live event and they got an RFQ from, the first event that we were doing, and they were blown away that they're getting that after one event. So anyway.
Right. So I definitely like that. So like a trigger for thinking about, is this a way of going to market that I want? That might make sense. That might solve my problems. Is if your problem is we're running demand gen, our inbound pipeline is good in volume, but it's not good enough in quality, and we lose on price. Like, there you go. Like, this is what all that means is you're there too late. They're coming to you later than you actually need them to be coming to you. And that is a trigger for thinking like, okay, we need to be doing relationship marketing earlier. We need to be in the door with help earlier, in a more serious effort-led way. I think that makes a ton of sense, and I like that as a takeaway for anyone listening who might be experiencing that issue or thinking to themselves like, man, I've been trying this demand gen thing and my sales team isn't quite as happy about it as I thought they would be. I think that makes total sense.
Yeah, I think to kind of summarize what we're talking about and what we've been talking about as themes on the show is, we don't want to deal with absolutes, right? Like, lead gen may work for some people, may not work for some people. Relationship marketing may work for some people, may not work for some people. But what we really want to do is kind of shift that mindset and have more people attempt it. And I think that's really the big takeaway, what we're trying to do with kind of these conversation magnets, relationship enablement plays, and what have you. And why I want to bring that up is because I think myself and Joseph really believe in it because of how we know each other. And I think I'll just give you the mic, Joseph, if you want to explain kind of how Mary, myself, and you all know each other and kind of how that all played out.
Yeah, definitely. And can I just say one last thing about this topic? So it was mentioned earlier, like, hey, this might not be a good play for bigger clients, but I would say where this works the best is when you have really large deals. Like, if your average sales cycle, your average lifetime value is going to be 250,000 or $1 million or 5 million, that's when it becomes really worth it to spend the time and invest in relationships. And so you're going to make this the content, whatever that downloadable is, very focused on only the right kinds of people would even be interested in downloading that. And then that's a trigger to say, okay, if this could lead to a $5 million deal, it's really worth it for me to get on a call and give this person some free advice for the opportunity that might turn into a deal in a year from now, because it's a $5 million deal, right? Whereas if you're selling something that's $3,000 or $5 or 10 or 20, you start needing to have transactions happen more often. And that's where this can become not really worth it to be investing that level of effort into the relationship. But yeah, to Aaron's point, I'm on this show ultimately because I started a podcast a couple of years ago, and Mary was one of my first guests, and we had met through LinkedIn, and you had posted something awesome, and I was like, hey, you should come on my show. And then, a year later, I had switched jobs, Mary had switched jobs, and I was seeing her content on LinkedIn. She talked about Aaron and mentioned him. I start following him. And then while I was hiring a performance marketing role on my team, I see Aaron Weeks as one of the submissions. I'm like, hey, I think I know who that guy is. And I look him up, and, lo and behold, we're connected on LinkedIn. And so I had reached out to Mary, and she gave him a great reference. And now Aaron and I have been working together for months, and it's awesome. We've had great rapport working together. And then Aaron invites me to come on his podcast. And so, now we're full circle here, and all because I was ultimately doing my podcast to build relationships with people in the space, and doing a play similar to what we're talking about here. And the other piece is I got my job at Proofpoint exactly the same way. I had my now boss on my show, and it was from him posting on LinkedIn and his wife posting on LinkedIn. I have him on my show, and then neither of us thought that would lead to a working relationship, but it turned out by the end of the call that it was like, hey, we should think about ways to work together, and kind of led to me coming to Proofpoint too. So building relationships does work, and it leads to, I think, much more solid results and more profitable results in the long run than just chasing after transactions.
Definitely. So in there and wrap up, Joseph, appreciate you coming on. You're welcome anytime. So just name a topic, we'll do it. For all our listeners, this is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everything's on YouTube. We are taking guests. I always pitch this, and we can literally talk about anything. I will say there will be someone on soon, and we're going to talk about history. So these conversations, to me, they matter. Again, we live our lives, and marketing is a part of it. I think that intersection is what the really fun thing is to talk about on this show. So give us a listen, check us out, give us a rating, and have a good one.
Peace.